Live from Austin, Texas. Welcome. This is Live and Let Live, the TV show by and for libertarians here for Travis County. Welcome back. I'm your host tonight, Rock Howard, and it's a pleasure to have you with me. We have a very special show tonight because it features our U.S. Senate candidate for the Libertarian Party here in the state of Texas, Dr. Mary Ruwart. Mary, thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me, Rock.
Great. We're going to have an exciting show tonight. We're going to take questions, hopefully from callers. We have a large studio audience as well. Thank you, studio audience. And we'll have questions from them. And it should be a very interesting hour, and I hope you can spend some time with us and find out about this remarkable candidate who's running for office here in the state of Texas. All right, let me start with some news items briefly, just to get you up to date what's going on locally for the libertarians out there. First, this reminder, Tuesday, October 10th, upcoming Tuesday, is the last day that you can register to vote. We certainly need you to go out and register if you haven't done so. One way you can do that is to visit a website called onlinedemocracy.com. You can register right on the web. So we hope you take care of that. If you're worried about registering to vote might make you eligible for, say, serving on jury duty, you can feel comfortable that if you have a Libertarian Party bumper sticker on your car, you're not going to be asked to serve on any juries, unfortunately. So they're not looking for people on juries who are able to think that well anyway. So if you can prove you can think for yourself, you're probably not going to get on a jury. So it was really, voting as a Libertarian is a great way to say, I want to reverse the trend of larger and larger government. In this state, it really looks like Governor Bush has got a lock on the election, so you can vote even if you're concerned about the major parties squaring off. You can vote with confidence in Texas for the candidate you really want to send the message that we want smaller government, both at the federal and state level. All right, let me go on. Sunday, October 15th at 2 p.m., the Libertarian Longhorns are sponsoring a light rail debate. This is going to be at UT campus, the Jester Auditorium, and it will be in room A121A. That's A121A, starting at 2 o'clock. The doors will open about 1:30. The debate will be between 2 and 4 o'clock. We have 3 representatives of both sides of the light rail debate. It should be very interesting afternoon, very engaging debate about the light rail issue. So we urge you libertarians and all others who are interested in this topic to come out and hear that debate. Also, Sunday, October 15th, starting at 5 o'clock, is going to be the Bruce Batchelor Memorial. Bruce was a longtime Austin-based libertarian, one of the most important volunteers in the libertarian movement, a war resistor, member of the Friends meeting here in Austin. And in fact, we'll have the memorial service at the Friends Meeting Hall, which is at 31st and Washington Square, and that will start at 5 o'clock on Sunday, October 15th. And I'm sure, like if you knew Bruce like I did, you will certainly want to be there. Friday, October 20th is our next working group meeting. The location is not yet determined, so please go to our website, www.austinliberty.org, and get details. And then Sunday, October 22nd, that's the day when our local Libertarian Party radio ads will start appearing on the air. We're going to have a lot of ads. They're mostly going to be on KLBJ, and we certainly want you to listen for them. Tell your friends. That should be a little bit different to have an actual media presence here for the Libertarian Party in town. So certainly look for that. I hear also that they're going to be working up some TV spots as well. I don't have any details about that yet. On November 2nd, that's the Thursday before the election, the Libertarian Longhorns are having a meeting where local Libertarian candidates will be speaking. That will occur from 11:30 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. On the West Mall on the UT campus. The Libertarian Longhorns are a growing and vibrant organization, and they're just doing all sorts of activities. We really appreciate their spreading the word to the UT community. And by the way, if you want to get involved with the UT Libertarian Longhorns, They meet on Tuesdays at the Art Building. That's the ART building, and that's room 1.110, 6:30 p.m. on Tuesdays. Or you can send email to utliberty@hotmail.com. And then finally, what we're leading up to for this election cycle, and that's Election Day, November 7th, Tuesday, November 7th. And we'll be having our election night party, and you can join us at the filling station on Barton Springs Road. We're going to start off about 7 o'clock. People tend to filter in during the evening and stay a while the election returns come in, and I'm sure we'll see a lot more in the way of Libertarian names on those election returns this time because we're running so many more candidates. Should be an exciting evening. So that's what's going on locally. It's been very, very busy for Libertarians. Lots of candidate forums, lots of interesting things going on in the various campaigns, and just thrilled that so many volunteers and activists have gotten involved. And we're also thrilled that tonight we have Mary Ruwart in the studio. Mary, thanks for coming by.
Well, thanks for having me, Rock.
So Mary, you're running for U.S. Senate, and you live in Burnet, Texas.
That's right.
And what made you think about running for office, and why are you running?
Well, I'm a small government advocate. That's my slogan. Small government is better. And the only place to really run with that slogan, as far as I'm concerned, is the Libertarian Party, because only Libertarians refuse to take taxpayer dollars for their conventions. Only Libertarians qualify for matching funds in their presidential race, and they refuse to take them on principle. And so, really, I think the American people have heard this small government rhetoric before, but when someone gets in office, they turn out to be big government people. So the only way that they can be sure that there's going to be small government is if they vote for libertarians who refuse to use tax money for political purposes before they get into office.
So I take it you're not using tax money for any purpose for your campaign?
No, not at all. No.
Well, I'm
strictly
actually not aware of
donations.
any libertarian who is. All right, let's see if we can get to some of the issues. Our studio audience here has been kind enough to feed us a few questions to get us rolling. You can try to call in too if you'd like, 472-CALL, and we'll try to take a few calls right on the air for you, Mary. Let's get started with some of your key issues here for your campaign. What do you think are the top effects that people will really feel in their lives if we can go through and have smaller government?
Well, I think the biggest one is that small government wouldn't take 50% of our income, our hard-earned income, in taxes. And of course they do today in income tax, sales tax, estate tax, gasoline tax. You can go on and on and on. So that's the biggest effect. I mean, imagine doubling your paycheck overnight without taxes. Now, yes, you'd still want to buy some services that those taxes used to buy, but you do it at half to a quarter of the cost. So in the end, you'd have more money in your pocket, maybe to send your children to a special school, donate to your favorite charity, work for the environment, whatever your particular cause was.
Yeah, I saw a survey recently that said that a lot of concerned voters, they like the fact the economy is being purring along, but they feel like they're having to spend more and more time at their jobs and at their careers, and they have less and less time for their families.
Well, that is not something that's just an impression. That, in fact, is true. You know, one of the things that's happened is we have laws in this country that put the disadvantaged out of work. I rented to these people for many, many years, so I know it intimately. These people are put out of work, and then the people who are still working have to put in more hours so they can pay the taxes to pay the welfare checks for these people. And so that is not just an impression, but a true fact. We are actually working more and having less leisure time if we are one of the ones that has a job. Whereas the other segment of society are disenfranchised. They are not allowed to essentially work and get wealth for themselves.
Yes, and I know that a lot of people may or may not have direct contact with a lot of these people, but certainly when we do outreach to these segments of the community, what they tell us resoundingly is they don't want to be on welfare. They don't want that approach.
That's right. In fact, I think that there was a poll recently, I think it was Rasmussen who did the poll. They called different people and asked them questions to determine, you know, if they were conservatives, liberals, libertarians. And what was very interesting about that poll in my mind is that the number of African Americans that had libertarian answers was quite high. Even though in the average population 21% of the people responded in a libertarian way, it was something like 31% for the African Americans, and only 6% of them were liberal.
That's very interesting, but really not too surprising if you really take the time to talk. I mean, you can't necessarily judge a population by their leaders.
Exactly.
I certainly wouldn't want people around the world having the impression that the United States is strictly what we put forward in terms of our leaders. And I'm sure a lot of the black community feels the same way. And of course, we do have a strong presence of minorities in the Libertarian Party, and really always have.
Yes, in fact, the black economists Walter Williams and Thomas Sowell are quite well known, and they are, of course, libertarians because they realize that many of the laws that people believe help the poor, such as minimum wage and licensing laws, actually hurt them a lot. In fact, Walter Williams said that as far as he was concerned, the minimum wage law was the one law that was the most detrimental to teenage blacks getting jobs.
Well, let's take another look at another segment of a population, and that is people who are thinking about retirement and are concerned about Social Security. What is your view of Social Security system, and how well or does it work for people?
Well, it doesn't work. I think everyone really knows that. When the system was started, there were 15 people that were working, supporting one retiree. In about 20 years, it'll be 2 workers for one retiree. Now, obviously, that's not going to work. I like the solution that Harry Brown proposes. He says take that 42% of the U.S. land mass that is currently owned by the government and sell it off so that that money can be used to buy private annuities for the people who are currently on Social Security, release the young people from the system right off the start, and of course have some phase out in between. Now, Chile, of course, several decades ago went to such a program. They didn't even sell lands and fund annuities. They simply converted totally to a private system. And what's happening, they're paying 40% less in taxes, but they're retiring on 50 to 100% of their final salary. I think that's what we'd like to see.
Yeah, that does sound like a better system, and one that's quite within the realm of believability. I mean, there's cases now where we see it working.
Right.
And even the main politicians basically are not trying to say that Social Security works, they're trying to save it.
Well, exactly. This idea of saving it, though, what they mean by that is that they want to take more taxes from our children and grandchildren. Now, most of us didn't work all our life to retire so that we could take the money literally out of the mouths of our children and grandchildren. And it's just not a one-to-one ratio. I mean, it takes $1 to $1.50 to collect just $1 in taxes, and then the bureaucracy that administers the program takes another 50%. So every dollar we get in Social Security is maybe $4 to $6 out of our children and grandchildren's pocket. Whereas if we had a private system and this money was growing and being invested, it'd be really invested into the future of our children and grandchildren. It would actually help them, not hurt them.
That's interesting. Let me go back to a point that you kind of threw in there that maybe people haven't thought about, and that is the sale of government assets. The trend has been toward the government appropriating more and more land and building more and more buildings and so forth. And so you quoted 42%?
That's right. 42% of the U.S. land mass is owned by government in some form or another. It's pretty easy to see. You probably wouldn't even have to sell all of it in order to fund Social Security annuities. Now,
that brings up another issue that's near and dear to a lot of people here in Austin, and that's concern about the environment.
Yes.
Because I've seen studies recently that suggest that government is one of the worst polluters around.
Well, it's not one of the worst, it's the worst. In fact, government every year puts more toxic chemicals into the environment than the top 5 chemical companies combined. So we have a situation where the fox is guarding the henhouse. This is even true in our national forests. We've turned our national forests over to government to protect them, but what's actually happening is our tax dollars are being used to build logging roads so that the paper companies can clear-cut our forests. Now, it's very interesting because these same paper companies, with the land that they own privately, make sure that they replant and take care of, because, of course, they've had to pay money for that land and those trees. But that's not happening in our national forests. So the smart thing to do would be to sell forest land to the paper companies so they could take care of them in the great manner that they're taking care of their own private land.
And I've heard other stories like this, rangelands
Yes.
and other places where serious, even right here in Austin, there was a case recently of a large ranch that was on the watershed, and a private buyer was found for that parcel through the Nature Conservancy. So there are approaches to finding private solutions and getting private stewardship that can make a lot more sense than just simply buying up this land. We don't know who in the future inside of government may have some very radically different ideas about how that land should be used.
Well, that's right. And also, I think we have to recognize that it's not that government people don't want to protect the land, but let's, for example, say that I was in charge of the National Forest, and you came to me as a paper company and said, well, you know, Mary, we really think that you should give us the trees. And if I said, well, I'm not going to because that's not environmentally sound, well, then you're going to go and fund my opponent in the next election. And so I'm in a position where if I don't give you what you want, I'm going to be out of office and won't be able to do any good. So there's always this sense of urgency for the government official to bend to the will of the corporations that could, of course, go and buy the land themselves and do a much better job and take very good care of it.
It's pretty fair to say that both of the established parties are doing a pretty good job to bending to corporate interests these days.
Yes, I mean, the system is set up to favor that because, of course, you, if you were the paper company, would have a lot to lose if you didn't get those trees, but individuals out there might just lose a little bit, so they're not motivated to come and fight very hard. And that's why the system is geared towards supporting the say the big boys, if you want to call them that, and not the little guy.
And you really think the libertarian solution would help alleviate that problem?
Oh yes, it's just like when we own our own house, we're more likely to take care of it than if we're a renter. Now it's true all owners don't take perfect care of their houses, but on the whole, they certainly do a better job than the renters. The bureaucrats, the government, is like a renter, but a private owner, of course, knows that if they take good care of the land, it will be worth more later. And if they don't take care of it, it'll be worth less, so they'll be punished by the marketplace for their indiscretion.
Furthermore, there's this notion of like deed restrictions. You could actually have contracts associated with the purchase in the first place.
That's right.
Where people would agree up front to maintain certain standards of environmental cleanliness on the property.
Right, and for something like Yellowstone, for example, you could have a covenant or a deed restriction saying that it would always be a park, not mined or something of this nature. And it would probably be better taken care of by the Nature Conservancy or a private group because, again, the bureaucratic mindset lends itself to problems. Early in Yellowstone's history, for example, the park rangers found that people like to see the deer and the antelope, so they actually encouraged the employees to kill the wolves and the other predators. Well, of course, this has caused problems, and now they're having to reintroduce the wolves. So the Yellowstone was not cared for in an environmentally sound way. It would have been, I'm sure, if we had environmentalists running it.
Okay, well, that's very interesting. You do have a way of making these libertarian ideas and solutions very succinct and so forth, and some have credited you for helping hone the libertarian message. And I wanted to point out to our viewers that Mary has put together a book called Healing Our World, which has a lot of these solutions in it. And let's see if Gary can bring up the still. If not, we'll just have Mary hold up the book. And we also, you're working on another book now, right?
Well, actually, I'm working on a revision of Healing Our World. I'm almost out of this edition, so I'm updating it. But people can still get Healing Our World as a free download at my website.
Oh, okay.
And that's www.ruwart.com, and that's spelled RUWART.com. So if they want a free download of the current version of Healing Our World, they just need to go to the website.
Great. So if you're interested in learning even more than what we can cover in a brief amount of time, please go to Mary's website and take a look at that information. We've got other questions from our studio audience that we're going to get into. And remember, you can call in 472-CALL, and we'll try to get your calls on the air. All right, so let's stick to some issues that are particularly interesting for the Austin area and for the local area and really for the state of Texas, although I'm sure we'll want to as a U.S. Senator, you would tackle all of the things at the federal level, mainly would be your purvey. Let's talk a little bit about housing, and we have this problem in Austin where housing is exploding in terms of cost, and the poor people in the community who want to stay here are having a tougher time making ends meet. How would Libertarians be able to help with that?
Well, I can speak with some authority on that because in Michigan I rented to low-income people and rehabilitated the housing there for about 15 years. And it was very interesting because I eventually got out of it, not because I had problems with my tenants or not because I had problems with the renovations, but because I had problems with the city buildings division. And basically, they would come into a low-income rental and say, well, your kitchen counter is 2 inches too short. You need to put a whole new one in. There were other restrictions, of course, on whether you could rent rooms with a shared bath and things of this nature. And those types of things, of course, kept the costs low for the people who were poor. So as there have been more demands made on the landlords by the city buildings division, the cost of the rental itself goes up because the renovation goes up. And so the poor are really in a situation where they can't afford housing anymore. Now, there was a study done on this by William Tucker, and what he found is that when you look at the homeless people, and certainly this is a problem nationwide, what you find is that about 50% of the homelessness is caused by government in terms of zoning restrictions, rent control, and building codes that push the price of the housing so far up that poor people can no longer afford it. And so they essentially, literally, end up out on the street. So in Austin, what we probably need to look into is relaxing those codes in those areas, and probably what we'd find is that the marketplace would come forward and give us enough units for poor people to have good rentals.
Well, I know we've heard recently that the Supreme Court, for example, has said that some of the provisions on zoning are unconstitutional, like provisions that say how many people can live in a dwelling and so forth. And yet those are on the books here in Austin. And I've heard the guy who heads up the zoning group here in Austin, who actually goes out and looks for violations based on tips they get from the population here. And what he said is those statutes are still on the books, and even though they've been ruled unconstitutional, they're still going to be enforced until someone actually brings forth a lawsuit, which would force them to be taken off the books. Now, this is patently absurd. That they would, because this is who's going to bring this lawsuit that's discriminating against people wanting to have more people per house than the zoning.
Certainly not the poor people who have many people per house. They can't afford it.
Those are the one people who can't afford this.
Exactly.
So we're going to need to do something here. This is one project Libertarians can certainly get involved with, is let's go ahead and get the wherewithal together to take a look at some of these zoning restrictions, and maybe we can find sponsors or other ways that we can bring this forward so we can take these unconstitutional provisions out of the Austin zoning code.
Well, actually, there is a group that is doing just that. The Institute for Justice in Washington, D.C. is a libertarian legal think tank, and they take pro bono cases in zoning and for the poor that have been put out of business by licensing laws. In fact, they even came after the City of Kalamazoo Buildings Division, which I was very happy to see. So perhaps they're a group that we could talk to.
All right, so the Institute for Justice would be a resource for this. Good. Yeah, the Libertarian movement is quite broad. It goes far beyond just the Libertarian Party.
Yes.
There's think tanks and there's activist groups of all stripe.
That's right, that's right. And if people are more interested in the Institute of Justice, they can go to their webpage at www.ij.org. That's
Okay.
www.ij.org.
ij.org. Are there any other particular libertarian groups that you're involved with or particularly fond of?
Well, of course, I'm very fond of the International Society for Individual Liberty. I'm on the board of that, and that is the international networking arm of the libertarian movement. They also have a website, www.isil.org. ISIL standing for, the
International
Society
Society
for Individual Liberty.
Individual,
And, you
okay.
mentioned earlier juries. like to
Yes.
talk a little bit about that because I'm
Okay.
also on the board of the Fully Informed Jury Association. And that's a libertarian think tank that is trying to educate jurors on their right to judge not only the guilt or innocence of the party involved, but the law itself. That is the traditional role of jurors. And of course, their website is www.fija.org. FIJA is what we call it, fija.org.
Okay, you're going to find some of those links on the Austin Liberty site at www.austinliberty.org. But let's repeat them real quick. There's ij.org for the Institute of Justice. We have isil.org for the International Society for Individual Liberty. And we have FIJA, Fija.org, .org, which is the Fully Informed Jury Association. And of course, you can also find the National Libertarian Party website at www.lp.org. So those are some places where you can get started to gather more information about things in the libertarian movement. So if you're concerned that all that's happening is this political party, first, this political party is making real headway now. We have almost 1,500 candidates running this time around, 115, I believe, here in Texas. So there's remarkable growth in terms of number of candidates running, much more than any other third party or alternate party has brought forward.
And don't forget, we have over 200 elected libertarians as well.
I actually saw a number that it was closer to 300 now.
Could be.
Yeah.
It's growing
So,
all the time.
That's right. Okay, and hopefully we'll have a few more in Texas. It's a little early to call some of these races, but it looks like libertarians will score a few victories in November. And of course, we should talk about that. Let's talk a little bit about why people might think about actually voting libertarian.
Well, on the back of my campaign literature, I say don't be a lapdog for big government. If you really want small government, but you keep voting for big government, then you really have no right to complain. I mean, here we have a party that is dedicated to smaller government and shows it by not taking taxpayer dollars. And every vote counts. The people who win elections look at the vote totals, and when they see that there's a minority view that's getting a lot of attention, they pay attention. In fact, in many races that I've run in, I've had my opponents come up to me afterwards and ask me about the libertarian philosophy and the Libertarian Party and what would libertarians do. And that's because they've noticed that a lot of people like that libertarian message. I have friends that say politicians are people who watch the direction the crowd is going in and jump in front so they can lead. And of course, when we give them the message about the direction we want to go in, then our politicians will jump in front so that they get our vote. I mean, libertarians, as you know, would be very happy to have our whole philosophy taken up by the Democrats and Republicans. We'd feel we'd won, even if we never were elected to office. So
And that has happened in history.
that's right.
Similar things have happened in U.S. history. There's a book out right now about why the socialist movement failed in the U.S., but, you know,
I don't think it failed.
I don't think it failed at all.
In fact, it was the most successful party of the 20th century when you think about what happened. They didn't elect many people, but if you compare the socialist platform in the early part of the 20th century to the Democrat and Republican platforms now, you see a lot of similarity.
Well, so there is a chance that we can achieve victory in our times, and the best way to do that is to actually support for and vote for what you want. And if you want smaller government, the Libertarian Party is the place to go.
That's right. This isn't a horse race where we're trying to vote on the winner. It's an arena in which we can make our feelings known and change the course of history literally by our vote.
Great. So you're watching Live and Let Live here on ACAC Channel 10, and we really are happy you're with us here tonight. Our guest, Dr. Mary Ruwart, has given us some engaging views on the environment, on taxes, on Social Security, and a number of other important topics. We've got another half hour ahead of us. I'm going to get back to some questions from the studio audience in a few minutes. You can still try to call in at 472-CALL. The phones may or may not actually be working tonight, but please try anyway if you'd like to get your question in. Before we take that up, first I have an important question for the studio audience. How is Mary doing tonight? All right. Well, that's good to hear. It's great to have you guys down here, and of course, it's exciting to have Mary here in town supporting her race. Let me hit a couple of high points of what's going on here in town for the Libertarian Party. Just a few reminders. If you want to register and vote, you've got to get out there and register by next Tuesday, and you can do that at a website called onlinedemocracy.com. There are plenty of websites where you can go out and register to vote, and if you're trying to find out voter registration information and you're really stuck, you might want to call the local Libertarian hotline. What's that number?
1776.
That's 467-1776, and you can get information about what's going on locally with the Libertarian Party, and I'm sure you can get information about how to register to vote. So get a hold of us or visit our website at www.austinliberty.org. Sunday, October 15th, 2 o'clock, light rail debate hosted by the Libertarian Longhorns. That'll be at UT campus, Jester Auditorium, room A.121A. That's A.121A at Jester Auditorium. And certainly want you to come out there and hear pro and con on light rail from supporters and concerned citizens about light rail. Also, Sunday, October 15th, 5 o'clock, is the Bruce Batchelor Memorial. That's at the Friends Meeting House at 31st and Washington Square. And Friday, October 20th, is our next working group meeting. Check out our website for details, www.austinliberty.org. Starting on Sunday, October 22nd, we've got radio spots put together and sponsored by the Libertarian Party. Will be airing, so watch for those radio spots. There should be possibly some TV spots also for Libertarian candidates, so keep your eyes open. The party actually has enough resources to go out there and do some fairly sizable media this year, and look for it. November 2nd, Thursday, November 2nd, 11:30 to 1:30 in the West Mall. There's going to be a candidate forum. We'll have a variety of Libertarian candidates speaking. And we certainly invite you to come here and meet your Libertarian candidates and find out what they're all about. That's 11:30 to 1:30 on the UT campus, West Mall. That's put on by the Libertarian Longhorns, and you can get information about Libertarian Longhorns, including where they meet and so forth, by sending email to utliberty@hotmail.com. And then finally, November 7th, that's election night. And as a Libertarian, you've got some interesting choices. Of course, the Libertarian Party is on the ballot. We're officially accredited party here in Texas, so you can get involved with the election process if you wish. You can be a poll watcher. You can go downtown and you can help count votes and collate votes and so forth. That happens at Palmer Auditorium. Or you can hang out with the Libertarian Party at our election night party, and that's going to be at the filling station, Barton Springs Road, starting about 7 o'clock. Going through the evening, we'll be watching the election returns and having a good time and getting ready for future elections. So that's what's going on, Libertarians. You got a lot to do, helping us put up signs and reaching voters and handing out literature. It's a very exciting season. We have more candidates on the ballot locally than we have had maybe ever, certainly in a long time, and really good candidates. It's very exciting. We'll run down those candidates later. But let's not waste any more time on local issues when we've got the U.S. Senate candidate for the state of Texas with us. It's Dr. Mary Ruwart. Mary, it's been a pleasure to hear you speak on the topics we talked about so forth. Or what are some of your other big issues that we haven't covered yet?
Well, I think health care is a big issue. I think it is for everybody. And that's because over the last 20 or 30 years, the government has gotten very highly involved in the medical field in a number of ways. Now, I have worked in research, trying to discover new drugs for many, many years, and so that's what I'm most intimately familiar with. And what has happened is that the regulation in that area has become so excessive that prescription drug prices have gone through the roof. Even so, the drug companies are only breaking even on 3 out of 10 drugs. So obviously the situation is bad for everybody. And I say excessive regulation because studies have shown, there's been studies done on the research itself, and studies show that these regulations actually decrease the number of new innovative drugs that are put on the market. And in fact, I had a situation where the FDA called me up and said, Dr. Ruwart, we know that you're working on prostaglandins and liver disease, and we know you've applied for the patent for this in the U.S. And we want to encourage you because there's nothing for alcoholic liver disease, and it might be good for other types of liver disease. And right now, the only solution is liver transplant. So we want to help you develop this drug. I said, this is great because these studies are very difficult. So does that mean that instead of having all these long, involved studies, that we could have fewer? And they said, oh, no, you got to have the same number of studies. We just want to let you know that, we're rooting for you, basically. Well, as we, when you think about trying to show that something is not only safe for alcoholics, but actually cures their disease, you recognize that it's a disease that takes years to build up, might take years to get better. So you having to look at a drug for many, many years while the patent runs out. You're having to look at patients that might not be the most compliant, so that means you need more of them. And in that particular disease, we didn't know really what to look at. We didn't know if we should look at liver biopsy, blood chemistry, whatever. It was very complicated, as you can see. So we could have spent millions and millions of dollars doing the study and fall just a tiny bit short of the statistical significance that the FDA requires. And then we would have been doomed because we would have run out of patent life. So we decided we wouldn't do it. We couldn't do it. But an alternative in a free market would have been for us to put the drug on the market and say, we know that this drug works in animals. We know it's safe for humans. So if you have liver disease and you want to try it, here it is. But of course, in today's climate, we cannot do that. So there, not only, and that's just really one small example. I saw many, many examples in my career where there are cures for diseases where there's only a few number of people that have this disease, but the drug companies can't develop it because it's too expensive. Even this orphan drug program that the FDA has really is too expensive for these things. So the FDA is actually stopping us from developing drugs. But even more, I don't know if I'd say sinister exactly, because the FDA understands what it's doing, but its hands are tied. If they approve a drug and there's any kind of side effect, and let's face it, every drug has a side effect in some people, then they get called on the carpet. So the only way their job is safe is for them not to approve anything. So they're in this no-win situation, and they know it. But the saddest thing in my mind is that there are many very inexpensive nutrients, for example, that help people quite a bit, that the FDA will not let vitamin companies talk about. We were working on a drug called a Lazaroid. It was called a Lazaroid because it was so wonderful. We named it after Lazarus, rising from the dead. That's how good we thought this drug was. And I had someone on an airplane once ask me if he could get a sample because he was dying and he wanted to try it. So when I talked to the people that had the drug in the company that I was at, they said, well, we're not allowed to give it out for compassionate use. We don't have a compassionate use protocol. The FDA won't let us. But just tell them to take lots of vitamin E. Now, why weren't we talking about how wonderful vitamin E was if it was essentially the equivalent of this very difficult drug? The reason is it has no patent life. The FDA won't let a drug company talk about it unless they go through all these expensive studies to show it would work, and then anybody could sell it. So this is ways in which the prescription drugs have become very costly, and things that we might never think of using for certain diseases, which are readily available and inexpensive, are not known and not used for treatment.
Right. So there's really two sides of it. One is that it's very expensive to get these newer treatments approved. And then coupled with the fact that when these new treatments finally get to market, there may be a very limited amount of time that the drug companies can get their money back.
Exactly.
Either the patent life runs out, the generics come in.
That's right.
And then how do they make their money? And so if you set up a situation where these companies have to invest billions for all the new treatments, and they have to make the money back quickly. Mm-hmm. And that means higher prices. There's just no way to cut that.
That's right. And you have to understand it's excessive regulation. Studies have shown that there is no added benefit from having all these extra studies. It's quite clear that this is excessive regulation.
So there's one thing where a libertarian approach to health might make a really profound difference.
Oh, very much so. In fact, I would say that 80% of the cost of medical care today has been caused in some way or another by government regulation.
Now, what could be a possible program that could allow us, if we had a libertarian in Congress, to do a small step in this direction that would make a difference and show that it would work?
Well, actually, it's been proposed by two researchers, Dirk Pearson and Sandy Shaw, that people simply have what they call an opt-out form. In other words, let's say that you're dying of AIDS or cancer and you want to try a new drug. All you need to do is sign a piece of paper saying, I absolve this drug company from any harm that may come to me for taking this drug. I realize it's not fully tested, but for me, it's worth the risk.
So you agree basically not to blame the FDA and not to sue the drug company.
Exactly.
Because you want to try it anyway.
That's right. And in fact, you know what's happening? There's a whole network of underground laboratories that are manufacturing new AIDS drugs and cancer drugs and selling them on the black market to these people that are dying. In fact, it's so prevalent that when we were doing studies testing new AIDS drugs, we had a hard time finding a patient population that wasn't taking it already. By the time we got it to a place where the FDA would let us test it in humans, it had already been manufactured in the underground and spread around the whole AIDS population.
That's truly amazing. So you're saying that with information technology the way it is and people finding out what's going on, they're going and they're bypassing the government anyway.
Exactly. The free market is working in the black market, so to speak. Of course, it would be better if it could work above ground. But when you file for a patent for a drug, it becomes public information, as well as the synthetic process. So all the underground chemists have to do is get a copy of the patent, and voila, they can make the drug. And of course, most of the people doing that are not making huge profits on it. They're doing it because, of course, they're trying to help people out. But regardless of that, it's obvious that the FDA, one way or another, is probably going to be bypassed. Certainly people who take nutritional supplements are essentially doing that somewhat as well.
Let's talk about, since we're sort of on the subject of black markets, free markets, and drugs, they say drugs for health. What about the drugs that are very specifically prohibited by the government? The so-called recreational drugs.
Oh. Well, that, of course, is such a mess. And the reason it is that because there's so much hype about the war on drugs, most people think that it's a big problem. It's actually quite small. There's about 7,000 people a year that die of drug overdose. Compare that to the 100,000 people who die every year due to alcohol, or the 350,000 a year that die because of tobacco-related illnesses. We're talking about a small problem that has been blown up into a big one. And in fact, the war on drugs kills more people than the drugs themselves. 80% of the 7,000 wouldn't have died if they were taking a pharmaceutical preparation that was manufactured by today's standards instead of being in the underground market where they cut it with different things and
So the
don't know
fact that it was
potency.
street drugs because of the law actually caused, you're saying 80%?
80% of those 7,000 deaths.
overdoses.
But you know, that's just the tip of the iceberg, because the number one cause of the spread of AIDS in this country is shared needles. And of course, people are sharing needles because it's illegal to buy them. You can't just buy them over the counter. You have to have a prescription essentially for them. So that's another problem. And then all the muggings, because the drugs are about 100 times what they would be in terms of price if they were legal. And so people are having to go out and steal and rob, and of course that means that they're sometimes killing their victims in the process. And then of course there's the gang shootings, the turf wars. It's just like prohibition all over again. The prohibition of alcohol didn't work, prohibition of drugs isn't. Now of course the big concern that we hear is, but our children. Well, if we want to get the drugs out of the schools, the biggest step is to get the pushers out of the schools. And the way to get the pushers out is to take the profit out by making it legal. We don't have pushers in schools for cigarettes or alcohol, even though those are illegal for children.
Oh, but those are regulated substances.
Yes, but notice that we don't have pushers pushing them on our kids. And of course, if we re-legalize drugs, and I say re-legalize because they were legal in the early 1900s and we didn't have a drug problem, then we wouldn't have the pushers in the schools.
Well, that certainly makes a lot of sense to most libertarians. And what's gratifying is that more and more whereas that used to be a cutting-edge issue that a lot of people had a tough time dealing with, now it's a fairly straightforward issue in a lot of people's minds. And you mentioned the Rasmussen survey of libertarian ideas recently. I think the numbers for supporting the end of the war on drugs were like 40%.
Well, you know, people have, of course, the real-life example of the Netherlands, too. They've stopped prosecuting people for hard drugs, and marijuana is totally legal there. They have marijuana coffee houses and a lot of different varieties. And what's happened is the addiction rate has gone down there because, of course, people don't turn to the hard drugs when they get the soft ones more readily. And so we have a situation where the age of the average addict is going up in the Netherlands because the young people simply aren't getting addicted.
Then you have the other just horrible side effect of the war on drugs, and that's how it ends up being used as really a racist tool for policing our cities and society and so forth.
That's right.
You're familiar with some of those statistics. It's just shocking how many people are in prison for nonviolent behavior related to drugs.
In fact, in '98, I think there were more marijuana arrests for possession than for all the assaults, murders, rapes, armed robbery, armed burglary combined. So what we have is we have our police going out and arresting peaceful marijuana smokers instead of going after the violent criminals. It's crazy.
Yeah, well, and then you have release programs to let the violent criminals go that can't be applied to people who are on for drug offenses.
That's right.
And those jail cells go to nonviolent people who need treatment in some cases, but certainly aren't getting treated while they're in jail.
That's right. In fact, they can get drugs in jail oftentimes, so why are we putting them there in the first place, and how are we helping them? I mean, how does it help a young person to spend 20 years behind bars for the crime of trying to feel good? How does this help them? I can't see that it could.
For most people in society that are in that situation, they don't incur that punishment. But if you're poor,
And you're
or
black.
if you're black or some other minority, then you're much more likely to suffer those consequences.
That's right, by a factor of about 10, I believe. I think that's what the statistics show. It is racist. It's very racist.
Okay, so we've covered now the war on drugs. I know we still have a lot of topics to go.
You know, let me unite the two topics we've
Okay.
talked about, the war on drugs and the medical, because that is a whole another area. Marijuana used to be in the pharmaceutical, the U.S. Pharmacopoeia as a drug that was very, very useful. In fact, it's I believe it's the most effective drug for glaucoma, which many of our elderly have to worry about. And certainly it is a special type of anti-nauseant. Those people who have cancer and AIDS who are taking chemotherapy have a large problem with that. I know my sister had cancer. She couldn't keep very much down at all. And yet the doctors refused to prescribe medical marijuana for her. In California, where the citizens have said, yes, we want our sick to have this, what's happening is the federal government has gone in against the state laws and has been prosecuting people who have followed their doctor's orders and grown and taken medical marijuana. For example, Peter McWilliams, who was our keynote speaker at our banquet at the National Libertarian Party Convention just a couple years back, had a run-in with the feds, and they made him stop taking his medical marijuana, and he has died recently. He was found in his bathroom, choked on his own vomit because he was not allowed to take his medicine. We have another Libertarian gubernatorial candidate, past gubernatorial candidate, I should say, Steve Cubby, who is going to trial this month for the same thing. He has a rare cancer that he uses marijuana to treat, and it's been very successful. In fact, I understand he's somewhat of a medical miracle because of this drug, and yet they're trying to take that away from him. Now, this is not compassion. And when we hear the government officials explain why they're prosecuting these people, they say, well, we don't want to send the wrong message to our children. And we certainly don't want to send the wrong message, and I think the wrong message is that it's okay to kill people and have them suffer because of the fear that maybe someone will want to have the opportunity to feel good. It's crazy.
Yes, it is, and it's a large and growing problem. You mentioned 2 cases there, but there are hundreds of cases around the country where we have people who are sick and infirmed and in prison for many years for trying to treat their own illness.
Yes, it's crazy.
Really, what it gets down to, folks, and really this gets back to the title of our show, Live and Let Live. Really, who owns your life anyway? Is it the government that owns our life, or is it you as the individual who should be the first and foremost to say what's right for you as an individual, what's right for you and your family members and the people you care about? That's what we're really talking about. I mean, this is a really cutting-edge issue all up and down the line. We can talk about it from the perspective of right to die. Not only the right for treating yourself the way you see fit, but then when treatment is no longer available or effective, then how you die. That's another thing. Drives up healthcare costs, makes people miserable. You have something to say about that issue?
I certainly do. You know, my sister was Dr. Kevorkian's 14th patient. She had duodenal cancer, and so, of course, after a while, the cancer blocked her digestive tract, and she couldn't eat anything. She vomited everything up. And she went to him, and he helped her. And it was a very, certainly a very emotional time for us. And what made it very, very difficult is that Marty was afraid that Dr. Kevorkian was going to land up in jail, as he now is, and wouldn't be able to help her. So part of her timing and decision-making was based on the fact that he might not be there later. So she decided that she would relieve her suffering early. And it's very interesting because, of course, we had to work around this fear that Marty would be stopped or that we would be prosecuted. It was very, very sad. And yet, when you think about it, Marty felt that the loving principle of the universe had brought Dr. Kevorkian to her. She called him her angel. And she, in essence, believed that she had been given a gift by having him in her life. And so it was almost a matter of religious principle. And when people say, well, you know, God doesn't want us to take our life early, so, you know, we shouldn't make assisted suicide legal, they're really legislating morality, because according to Marty's belief system, this was God's gift to her. So once we start legislating morality, we've taken away that line between the separation of church and state, and we've invited those two to be conjoined again, which of course we know from the past doesn't work. But I think Marty saved lives when she went early, because 80% of the medical costs that we incur happen in those last few months of our life. And anyone who's had a sick loved one knows that health care today is rationed. And by going early, Marty made all that health care available for someone else. And hopefully someone else on the edge that could have gone either way got a doctor's attention that they wouldn't have otherwise gotten, and of course lived to tell about it.
It's a very touching story. I know locally here in Austin, a number of Libertarian candidates were at the AARP Candidates Forum, and the topic came up. Did for my panel. I don't know about your panel. I'm running as state rep in District 49, and the topic came up in my panel, and I jumped all over the issue and very much on the side of you are. Not all libertarians are exactly in a 100% agreement on this particular topic, but certainly I felt very strongly about it too. But this is a topic that most establishment party candidates will steer very well wide of. But really it gets down to principles and fundamentals. Who owns our lives?
That's right. That's right. Who owns our life? Who can tell us that we must suffer so that they feel better about themselves and their world? Obviously, a lot of people think that they own us, but I certainly don't.
I do think, too, that a lot of people vote in order to make themselves feel less guilty or something, and their idea is that I'll vote for the guy who I think will do the most good for the people that I don't know and I don't want to know, but I hope somebody will take care of them.
Well, you know, that's a very interesting aspect of charity today. It used to be in the olden days that the people who were charitable didn't just give money. They went to the houses of the poor. They got to know the poor. And it was that example and interaction that really help the poor the most, because again, having rented to these people for many years, I can say that many, if not most of them, are in the situation they're in not because of some tragedy in their life, but because of the way they think and interact with their world. If they have someone who has successfully been able to hold down a job and make something of themselves, interacting with them, they can learn those skills and ways of thinking as well. And so a large part of helping people is not money. It's really not about money. It's about helping them grow. That's what the real help is. And I remember some very touching stories with my tenants where I helped them grow as well, showing them how the legal system was going to hurt them if they didn't pay their rent on time, because every time they went to court, that was a black mark for the next landlord. So we worked with them, and this is the type of thing that is absent from our system today. So giving at the office is not true compassion.
All right, you're listening to Live and Let Live, and our guest, Dr. Mary Ruwart, who is candidate for U.S. Senate. If you're going to take the time to vote over the next few weeks on up to Election Day, certainly want to give Mary consideration on the ballot. There'll be a lot of Libertarians up and down the ticket, and we're happy to have Mary as our candidate at the very top of the Libertarian Party ticket here in Texas. And Mary, we certainly wish you a lot of luck with your campaign. Is there anything about the campaign that you want to say? I know you have a website.
That's right. I would like to encourage people to go to the website because they can download a free copy of Healing Our World, my book, which explains a lot of these things, and that's www.ruwart, RUWART.com. I also have a number of issue papers they can download, and of course, they can contact me through my website, mary@ruwart.com.
All right, so they can send you email?
They can, yes.
Yeah, mary@ruwart.com. Great. And we certainly have a lot of candidates up and down the ballot. Maybe Gary could queue up our list of candidates. We're going to go this evening. If you're watching live on October 7th, here Saturday, October 7th, you might want to make a note. Mary and I and our gracious studio audience, we're going to head down to La Madeleine, which is at 34th and Lamar, for a little while after this is over. We'll be wrapping up here in a couple of minutes. So if you'd like to come down in person and meet some of our candidates, meet Mary, that would be absolutely outstanding. Let me go down our ticket here real quick. At the very top of our ticket, Harry Brown, we mentioned him earlier, our presidential candidate, and Harry is showing up very vigorously in the polls right now, and his ads are running across the nation as well. The vice presidential candidate, Art Olivier, who was former mayor of Belmont, California. Our U.S. Senate candidate, who you met tonight, Mary Ruwart, Dr. Mary Ruwart. Also, 10th Congressional District here in the Travis County area, that's Michael Davis, running for that office. We also have other statewide offices. In fact, the Libertarians are running in 7 of the 9 statewide races, and that includes Carolyn Fields, Anthony Garcia, Mike Jacoboulos, Joe Eisen, Lance Smith. They're all worthy of your vote. We also have Rice Scott Kimler. Locally, we have Tom Davis running for District 14 State Senator. He's been a frequent guest on Live and Let Live. Michael Badnarik for District 47. Philip Durgan for District 48. Myself, Rock Howard, in District 49. District 50, we have Vince May. For State Board of Education locally, we have Nancy Neal running in District 10. We also have a candidate for Sheriff, Darren Roush. Tax Assessor Collector, which is a particularly useful position for a Libertarian to hold. That would be Jerry Chandler running for that office. Constable, we have Elaine Hunt in Precinct 2, and also in Precinct 5, James Branham, who is running a very active campaign and certainly deserves your consideration and support. And finally, Justice of the Peace in Precinct 1, James Bednar. So there you have it. You're going to see lots of Libertarians on your ballot. And Mary, we're really thrilled to have you on the ballot.
Thank you.
And we wish you a lot of luck with your run for U.S. Senate.
Well, thank you.
Okay, folks, this has been Live and Let Live for October 7th, year 2000. This is the longest-running Libertarian TV show in the nation that we're aware of, and we really do appreciate your continuing support. Be sure to tune in every Saturday night at this time at 8 o'clock for Live and Let Live, and stay tuned for Smash the State with Gary Johnson. Thank you, everybody.
Okay. Time to get out.